We've had a closed meeting starting at 6 o'clock. And out of that meeting, we're going to rise and report. I'm going to read the following resolution: that the confidential report CPS CL 2019-023 regarding personal matters about an identifiable individual, including municipal or local board employees, committee appointment be received, and that council appoint Janice Quirt to Sustainable Orangeville, and that staff bring forward a bylaw to amend the appointments to various boards and committees bylaw 021-2019, and that confidential verbal report from Ed Brennan, CAO, regarding personal matters about an identifiable individual, including municipal or local board employees, public office holders, be received, and that staff proceed as directed. May I have a motion for that? Councillor Sherwood, seconded by Deputy Mayor McIntosh. All in favor? Thank you. Okay, so if we could stand, if you're able, we're going to sing our national anthem. Our home and native land, true patriot love, in all of us command. With glowing hearts we see thee rise, the true north, strong and free. From far and wide, O Canada, we stand on guard for thee. God keep our land glorious and free. O Canada, we stand on guard for thee. O Canada, we stand on guard for thee. This meeting is being aired on public television and are streamed live and may be taped for later public broadcast or webcast. Your name is part of the public record and will be included in the minutes of this meeting. To avoid disruptions during our meeting, we'd appreciate it if members of the audience would please turn off or mute your cell phones or other personal digital devices. Orangeville Town Council welcomes and encourages members of the public to comment on matters of interest to them. However, delegates are cautioned that derogatory or inappropriate remarks may constitute slander and could potentially lead to legal action against them. If such comments are made, the delegate will not be permitted to continue speaking, and the comments will not be recorded in the minutes of the meeting. As we move on our agenda, we are at item number 8, and may I have a motion to adopt the minutes of the meeting of November 11th. Councillor Andrews, seconded by Councillor Sherwood. All in favor? Okay, now we're on to 9, presentations, petitions, and or delegation. 9.1. Ms. Diane Dubé regarding trailer parking. Would you like to come forward and speak to us, please? Thank you. And could you move the microphone towards your, so we can all pick you up?
Okay.
Thank you.
I'm here to request the bylaw, a bylaw for RVs being parked in driveways. I can't see down the street. It's very long. I think the RV is about 45 feet, and my driveway's 50, so I'm kind of estimating. But it hangs down there, and I can't see to back out of the driveway, but I haven't seen down the street since I've lived there. He's parked there for 6 months of the year, and he uses it 12 days. So it creates, like, I've replaced the flower garden every year because they don't survive. So I have a dehumidifier running in the basement just to keep the dampness away because it never dries up. So I was requesting that, I don't see the point of them parking there actually, other than convenience. You know, so I'm just requesting that maybe there could be a bylaw preventing this, or long, like really long, that you can at least see down the street. I haven't seen the street in one summer, and I haven't been able to sit on the front steps because it's just shade and dark.
Right. I wonder if we could ask Mr. Jones, could you comment on this?
Yes, Your Worship. There is a memo that was written by Planning Division staff in in tonight's agenda to accompany this delegation. In short, this would be part of a zoning bylaw. And right now, our zoning bylaw does not prohibit the parking of recreational vehicles on residential properties. It is mentioned specifically in the bylaw. There are limits to the size of a truck that could be parked on a property, but not an RV. That said, there are practical constraints. An RV couldn't be parked across a park or up across the sidewalk. It could not be extending out onto the roadway. However, if it's parked on a property, currently our zoning bylaw does permit it.
Any other councillors wish to weigh in on this at all? Councillor Taylor.
Thank you, Your Worship. I don't have a solution necessarily, but I have sympathy for what you're describing. You know, we've been through this before, and I've had trailers parked by my properties, and you can't see the sun sometimes when these trailers are there. It does block off sites. So I'd just like to say, I guess, I think you have a great point. Now, that being said, I know there's some trailer people amongst us, and I understand that it would be expensive for them and inconvenient for them to find other locations. So I don't necessarily have a solve, other than the fact that I don't think we should just dismiss this, you know, and not at least look into something that can be done here. So, thank you.
Thank you, Your Worship. My concern too is, where's the stop? You know, people have boats in the driveway, people have snowmobile trailers in the driveway. If you go looking into a bylaw for this, where are we going to stop? Size of people's vehicles block the sun? Like, I just don't see an end to this if you go down that path. Thank you.
So is there any council member that'd like to make any kind of a motion here to direct staff in any way? Deputy Mayor McIntosh.
Could I make a motion to receive the report?
Okay. Seconder, receive the report. Deputy, Councillor Sherwood. All in favor? Opposed? Councillor Taylor. Okay. So I guess what, Ms. Dubé, what this means is we're receiving your report. We understand your concern. We're not taking any action at this moment on this. I think maybe my suggestion to you was maybe to get some more people involved, and maybe if there was a larger contingent of people that were up in arms on this, that you know, but for one person to complain to change a bylaw, it's not the type of process that we get involved in, unfortunately.
I'm the last house on the street, and it doesn't affect anyone else other than me, because all the way up the street, they're not being affected. Everyone has sunlight but me. And we don't have a sidewalk on my side of the street, otherwise he would have been crossing over it. He would have taken right past to the median.
And have you spoken with your neighbor?
No, I haven't.
No.
But it wouldn't be so bad if it was a shorter period of time. He uses it 12 days out of that 6 months that it's parked there. And then he removes it for the winter. I wouldn't mind in the winter, there's no sun anyway, but in the summer, it would be nice to have your flower garden and sit in the front porch. But,
Right.
yeah, I have no.
Okay, ma'am. Thank you for coming. All right. Mr. Taylor.
Oh, excuse me, ma'am, I know you're leaving. I just, there is other ways around this. I know you're at the end of the street and you say that you're on your own, but Mayor Brown brings up a great point, and it's unfortunate. It's going to take some work on your part, but it's advocacy. And you're going to have to find other people that are interested in that and get them to perhaps sign a petition or have a delegation to council, that sort of thing. I understand that. I just don't want you to leave thinking that we didn't hear you and you're out of options, because that's not the case. It's just unfortunately, you're going to have to do a little bit more legwork on your own beforehand. So please do that and come back. Okay.
All right, moving on to 9.2. We have a delegation, Debbie Sipkema from the Dufferin County Cultural Resource Circle. Welcome.
Okay, sorry, I just wanted to make sure I was live here. Before I start, I just wanted to send a message to council from both Chief Najawan from the unceded territory of Nawash, as well as Elder Shelley. They send their regrets for being unable to attend the event today. They've both had battled with bouts of flu, pneumonia, colds. It's been, between the two of them, it's been crazy. But they acknowledged the work being done by the council tonight and by the DCCRC in partnership with the council to bring up the acknowledgement for the Indigenous people of the territory. And they both said, keep up the excellent work.
Great, thank you.
So the importance to this acknowledgement this council is about to decide on is greatly appreciated and acknowledged. And the dedication of the hard work from Ray Osmond and his team, and of course council as well. I'm sorry, just a second, pardon? Oh, sorry. We wanted to explain to, what, I'm sorry, maybe, here, go ahead, Gil, you.
All right, just thank you very much for your time and honor being here. For council meetings and for town facilities and formal events in this town of Orangeville, that would be an honor and appropriate.
I believe, Karen, was there anything you wanted to say? Or Darren, anything you'd like to add?
Okay, this area was utilized by the Indigenous who lived in this area. They traveled also through this area. They held their gatherings in this area. They gathered their medicines in this area. And it was a main corridor between Georgian Bay, Lake Ontario, and Lake Huron. Okay?
A lot of work on this, because this is kind of a nexus point of various Indigenous tribes, I guess, this area. And so it was difficult to actually overlay the different tribal ancestral lands on this area. So, but as part of our embracing the Truth and Reconciliation recommendations, that we're happy to put this forward and to include land acknowledgement. So let me read it. I took some pronunciation pointers earlier this evening. I'm going to hope I can nail this. We'd like to acknowledge the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe people, including the Ojibwe, Potawatomi, and Odawa of the Three Fires Confederacy. Got that? Nice. Okay, so yeah, and I think we're happy as a council to add this to our ceremonies and to our council meetings. So thank you very much. Councilor Andrews.
Thank you, Your Worship, and before the members of the DCCRC depart, and I'm certainly hoping that you stay around for a little while, but again, having the opportunity of being connected with this wonderful organization for a number of years. I just wanted to take a couple of seconds to read something from the report so that those that may be viewing, those in the gallery that may not know historically the connection to this. So acknowledging the land that has been a practice of Indigenous peoples for generations and recognizes their connection to the land, following the release of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission of Canada's report, which includes a number of calls to action, a number of municipalities across Canada undertook the identity of local land acknowledgements that are used to open formal meetings, which again has just taken place by our mayor. Land acknowledgements are viewed as an important beginning step towards reconciliation. As such, it was needed to be developed in partnership and approved by the traditional territorial people of the area. And we've had that opportunity of working with the elders and those that have a wonderful history in our region. So on behalf of myself, and I know the members of council, we thank you for being here. We've learned a lot. We're going to continue to learn a lot. With the utmost respect, we are proudly going to be acknowledging the land acknowledgement at all of our meetings and certainly other town events in the months and years to come. So thank you for being here.
Deputy Mayor McIntosh.
Thank you, Worship. I actually do have a question, Debbie. I attend a few theater events, and at the beginning of the theater events, they do land acknowledgements. Is this the same land acknowledgements that Theatre Orangeville does?
No, sir. And not to put down what the Theatre Orangeville does, that comes from a different teaching than the one that I'm presenting you. I believe he got his information from the Mississaugas, where I have connected to the people that I know of the area. It's just two different teachings. Same thing, two different teachings.
Okay, thank you. It just seems confusing. It's the same building, but
Yeah,
thank
I
you.
understand.
Very good. Councillor Taylor.
Thank you, Your Worship. I appreciate you, Deputy Mayor, bringing up the theater, and I think it's appropriate to say I'm so thrilled that the theater actually brought that forward first within the town. I would offer no criticism to it. It was actually written by Bernadette Hardacre, who is the general manager of the theater, and it was approved by the board, which I'm proud to be on and be a part of. And it was first and done in a fashion that, you know, you could criticize for it being rushed or whatnot, but I was so pleased when the theater did it. I was honored to be a part of the theater, honored to be in the town and have them have that. And now that we have this, I'm just as thrilled that we have this as well. It's very important that we do these things and be respectful of our past. And I'm so pleased that you've come here tonight and we finally have something here, and I'll be pleased to hear it each council meeting when we all sit together. So thank you very much.
Great. Anything further from any councillors? No? Thank you, Gil and Debbie. Appreciate it. Thank you for all your work. I guess, yeah, we do need to have a motion. So the recommendation is that that we report CPSCL 2019-025 regarding land acknowledgement be received, and that council adopt the following land acknowledgement for the town of Orangeville, and that it be used to open council meetings at town facilities and formal events as appropriate. So we need to have a motion to accept this land acknowledgement. Deputy Mayor McIntosh, second by Councillor Andrews, all in favor. Thank you. Delegation 9.3, Max Waters.
The petition, who should I hand that to?
Our town clerk, please.
Lovely. Thank you, Town Clerk. I have some fun little pamphlets here. I've got some chicken people in the back, and I've got a slideshow. So I cut it from 7 to, pardon me?
You have chicken people here?
Yeah, chicken, look at all the chicken people.
Hey!
We got posters, we got everything.
All
It's amazing. Is this just like press spacebar or like arrow over? Let's hope so.
I'm
we'll
not
figure it
sure.
out.
Yeah, probably. Yeah.
I'm going to read my delegation to keep it brief. Otherwise, it could be tangenty, and we don't want that. So, good evening, Mayor Brown, town councilors, fellow citizens, chicken supporters. Tonight, I would like to talk about amendments to Orangeville Bylaw 682000, specifically in regards to prohibited animals and backyard laying hens. Tonight, I will present you with some fast facts about hens, discuss how hens align with Orangeville's sustainability goals, and tell you about what a bylaw could look like based on our neighboring communities. Here are some big myth busters for you. Laying hens are very quiet ladybirds who are never louder than people conversing, approximately 60 to 70 decibels. By comparison, the average dog bark is 80 to 90 decibels, or the same level as a person shouting, or my mother-in-law's schnauzer, who she kept in Orangeville for 7 years. How does allowing backyard hens tie in with our guiding documents? Well, Orangeville has several guiding documents, as you all know. There's the official plan, the strategic plan, the Sustainable Neighborhood Action Plan, and from there, there's also the Headwaters Food Charter and Action Plan. In regards to these guiding documents, I and the Orangeville Sustainable Action Team have found support for urban hen keeping in the following. Orangeville's strategic action plan, Orangeville's strategic plan seeks to advance environmental initiatives, resolves that the town should care for and create a sustainable environment. Lastly, it seeks relevant action towards ensuring the sustainability and improved quality of life. In the official plan, quality of life speaks to support for decisions that are sustainable, to ensure that the quality of life for future generations is not compromised. And the sustainability portion calls for working towards embedding sustainable principles and processes into the day-to-day decision-making. Environmental sustainability states, Council will strive to conserve, protect, and enhance the natural environment by promoting best practices in sustainable development. That one might have been a little bit of a stretch, but it's there nonetheless. Mostly, Orangeville's Sustainable Neighborhood Action Plan, or SNAP, is quite a tome. So for brevity, I took the highlight for hens, which is access to healthy and local food, as it pertains to the signing of the Headwaters Food Charter and Action Plan. The charter, in turn, calls for environmental responsibility, food access and equity, health and well-being, among other objections. And here are some critical calls to action from that document. 1, that the local government develop policies to reduce food waste, encourage healthy environmental choices, and low-impact agricultural production practices. 2, the goal to design and plan communities for easier access to healthy food. And 3, to support hands-on opportunities to develop and build food systems in priority populations, including youth and children, which I'm going to loop back to. So what could this proposed amendment look like? Taking a cue from communities that go before us, here are some of their best practices for backyard hen keeping. Residents become practiced at being good neighbors. They speak to their neighbors and obtain written consent before they apply to the town. I think that that's a really important thing. It creates a foundation of trust, respect, and dialogue between neighbors before chickens are present. Residents submit a fee, and then they are subject to inspection before hens are permitted. Hens only live in backyards. This isn't a free-for-all. Appropriate care of animals is required under current laws, Ontario and municipal. No slaughter of animals on property, and on property is allowed at all. I don't think anybody needs that in town. So who has gone before us? Well, many Ontario municipalities have legalized backyard hens. Across Canada, hens are becoming the urban norm, from Vancouver to Whitehorse, and actually Halifax in recent months their council passed a permission for a report to be created. So it's very exciting. Locally, Caledon went last year, and Newmarket as well. Kitchener, Brampton. Actually, Brampton seems to have allowed chickens forever, and Guelph is also Guelph, so seems like forever as well. I couldn't find any dates on the bylaw amendments, so I assume they've always just been there. So why does this matter to me? Why should it matter to you or the town beyond the guiding documents? Well, laying hens are a great way to teach children about their food. We planted a crabapple tree in my front yard because we lost the maple tree that was in our front yard before we moved in came down. My daughter loves running around in the front yard and picking apples off the tree. Apples is her favorite word right now. She's 20 months old. I would love for us to have chickens in our backyard so that we can collect eggs together. We can talk about where food comes from. We can talk about respect for animals, and we can talk about, you know, the food chain and how do we buy food? How do we purchase our food? Pasture-raised eggs are healthier than factory-farmed eggs. I can find you some citations for that. Chickens can suppress pests such as ticks, which is becoming a pretty big issue as climate change progresses. Hens are a gateway animal to greener living, which I think was a point that I made to the Banner reporter who I spoke to originally. Hens create fertilizer, which in turn encourages gardening, which in turn encourages physical activity, which in turn makes you think about what you're cooking from what you're making in your garden. And it encourages people to rely less on big agriculture. Chickens are also excellent food recyclers. They can eat a ton of kitchen waste. So the conclusion for me is the time has come for hens. I think that starting with a staff report and a pilot project would be a really great place to go. I don't think we need to say like chickens tomorrow. There are many people who have supported this campaign. I know that there have been previous campaigns in town, and I know that their petition actually had more signatures than mine. I don't think I have as much social media contact as the lady who went before me. We would love to see the approval of the motion that will be put forward this evening. I have for submission letters of support in our petition with signatures to date.
Great.
And I'd like to thank you very much for your time.
Well, that was a nice presentation. Thank you very much. Councilors, anybody like to weigh in? Councilor Peters.
Sure. Thank you very much, Ms. Waters, for the presentation. Just for council's knowledge and the public, this issue's been with Sustainable Orangeville Committee for some time. They've endorsed moving ahead with it, and you'll notice later tonight we'll be speaking about not only bylaw review, which is convenient, but the notice of motion I made previously regarding a staff report. So we can wait to have a more fulsome discussion at that point. But again, thanks for the presentation. I think it was very comprehensive.
Councilor Andrews.
Thank you very much, Your Worship, and thank you very much for your presentation. It's provided some education for those of us that may not necessarily know a little bit about, and please, I would be happy to take one of your pamphlets. I appreciate the idea of asking for a pilot. I think that you take a look at the communities that have already instituted this process, and I'll be driving around to take a look at how some of these activities have taken place. I guess out of my curiosity is, some of my naivety, because again, I don't have any neighbors at this point that have even considered something like this, and I appreciate the process of educating how someone would implement something like this in their neighborhood or even in their backyard by going to their neighbors saying this is something that's under consideration. But when you take a look at some neighborhoods, we have dogs and cats. I know that in my neighborhood in particular, I have cats that, for whatever reason, explore. I have some neighbors that don't know that their cats are exploring in my backyard. And again, from a safety perspective, I know you have the coop. That coop itself would allow the containment of the hens, protection of the hens. But what about the elements? You take a look at this time of the year. Again, that's just showing a little bit of my naivety of the matter.
I've read a few different things. I haven't kept chickens myself, but I have a brother who lives in an unorganized township in very northern Ontario, and they've kept chickens. So you basically need a little bit of electricity, keep a light on, and that usually heats it up enough. If you've got 4 hens in there, they'll keep each other warm. There's also several programs in southern Ontario that allow you to rent a chicken.
Okay.
So they bring you a coop and hens for the summer, and they pick them up in late October. So if you don't want to have electricity running out to your yard, no big deal.
Okay, just trying it out.
Yeah, right? And I think that's also really nice too, because people sometimes they don't want to deal with all those things. So there's options available for sure. But yeah, run an extension cord out, plug in a little light, your hens will be toasty, toasty.
What would be the average cost for a coop, and what would be the average cost for a hen? Be that up to the numbers that you've spoken about here under a pilot?
Slippery slope, right? I think chicken coops are much like a lot of other things, like a shed. You could build a $100 shed, or you can build a $2,000 shed, and I've seen the gamut of coops. There's a whole lot of things you can do. I'd say for a suitable enclosure, you're probably looking at probably $250. As for chickens, I actually don't know what they cost, but you get them when they're little babies, and I don't think it really is a thing. But we would want to be making sure that people get hens and not roosters, so you want to make sure that there was a distinguishing. I don't actually know.
What I do appreciate is the fact that you've talked a little bit about the education. I think anyone that would be considering something like this, they're not necessarily going to end up knowing everything, and the process itself is something that's very important for people to respect the fact that there is care, animal care. You want to ensure that things are done properly. And so, but thank you very much.
Councillor Sherwood.
Yes, Your Worship, through you, thank you. I just had a question as well. Is there any evidence of hens, backyard hens, or the coops attracting more wildlife? Being an urban area, I would be quite concerned about coyotes being in the neighborhood trying to get access to the coops.
I mean, I think that's fair because on Centennial, I've seen coyotes, so like they're around anyway. There's nothing to show that hens bring in more predators. If you're keeping their food appropriate, again, it's an appropriate thing, right? Like, do you have an appropriate food container when the bylaw officer comes to approve your enclosure? If you don't have a proper food container, you need to keep all of its food contained nicely. Like you would with dog food, keep it in a container so your dog can't get to it when you don't want your dog to eat. Same thing with coyotes, etc. If you build a coop that's appropriate, that has good latches, put your chickens away at night, shouldn't be a problem. I hadn't read anything that had said you will see more predators in your neighborhood because of it.
So there's no real studies that would say that they attract it, because I don't think it's necessarily the food. I'd be more concerned about them actually trying to get to the hens themselves.
I don't think in town that it would be an issue, but again, I wouldn't have the expertise to speak to that. So
Okay, thank you.
my honest answer would be, I'm not really sure.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Councillor Taylor.
Thank you, Your Worship. I have two questions, one for yourself and one for Councillor Peters, if I could. First of all, a bit of a statement. I'm not a chicken crusader. However, I have an Orangeville legend that lives next door to me in Paul Corston, who is a chicken crusader, so I know I'll hear from it if I don't vote accordingly this evening. But I guess my concern is two things. So when you mention the consent by the neighbors, which I think is great, how do you think that's going to go? Like if I think about my own house, I have people on either side of me. I have 3 houses in the back of me. I've got 3 houses on the other side of the street. So 7 or 8.
I have 8 neighbors.
I would guess.
What I would propose, if it were me, would be that everyone whose backyard touches your backyard. I have 5 people.
Just backyards.
Yeah, 5 people whose backyard touches my backyard. I know.
And what would you think would be reasonable, that 3 out of the 5 say go and 2 say no and you go?
I'm really good at baking scones, and I'm
Yes.
very personable. So what I think is I show up with I chat with my neighbors pretty regularly anyway.
Yeah.
I don't know, that doesn't seem like the norm judging on council tonight, but I think you should talk to your neighbors. And if
I
your
think you
neighbors
should too.
are maybe not open to the idea, then probably you have a friend in Amaranth or Mono who has a property, and you could maybe share chickens with them. I'm not really I don't really like to muddy the waters with a lot of angry neighbor talk. I really
Yes.
think we should talk to our neighbors, and I think if I'm reasonable and I'm like, hey, look, I did this chicken course and I learned about chickens, and hey, my daughter who you've met and she runs around, she's super cute. We'd really love to keep chickens and share our eggs with you. Would that be okay with you? And if they were really no chickens, I'd be like, okay, that's fine. I'm probably gonna start calling the bylaw officer about your dog all the time. Just saying. And maybe stick in a few fun pokes and see if
Yeah.
you can work something out with them. And if you can't work something out with your neighbors, probably you don't want to have chickens anyway, because they're gonna be calling someone about your chickens all the time or coming to council complaining about your chickens. So you probably don't wanna get chickens anyway.
Yeah.
That's kind of my feeling on it. I would love to have chickens in my yard. If my neighbors were going to make it hard for me, I probably wouldn't want chickens in my yard.
Well, you seem like a good egg, but thank you. I think we'll have to just think that through a little bit with the neighbor piece, but I appreciate you bringing it up. And then if I could for Councillor Peters, it's too bad that they're not intertwined on the agenda, but it seems like they should be. And I guess my question is, I always like having staff. I think about when we were elected and I got Council 101 and I was threatened by Ed and a little bit of Mr. Jones to make sure I consulted with staff. The first part of your motion says, let's bring this to staff. And the second part speaks to, you know, let's have them create a pilot program. And again, I don't have anything against it necessarily. It just feels funny that it feels like staff should come to us with a report first prior to working on some sort of pilot program, because what if they say that this is a really bad idea and we're not going to proceed? So, you know, I'm wondering if there's a friendly amendment or perhaps you have rationale, but I don't know that we should create a pilot program prior to finding out. And I am supportive. I think it's a great initiative. And if Paul Corsten's watching, I'm going to vote yes, Paul. But it feels like we might have the chicken before the egg on this one. That was a good one.
Okay. Deputy Mayor McIntosh.
Thank you, Worship. I also will be supporting this, but I do have a question for Councillor Peters. You talk about a pilot project. How long do you envision a pilot project to be?
Councillor Peters.
I'll go in order, if you don't mind, Deputy Mayor. Through you to Councillor Taylor. I think the intent here was that if council's on board with the concept of allowing them, the foot in the door, the entry piece for the community is that pilot project, so that they know this is something we're going to work through and we're going to find those people that want to test it out and those people that will champion it and make sure it works for, you know, the neighborhood that they're in and the neighborhood that is Orangeville. So I think they kind of go hand in hand. If staff were, you know, in the creation of that report to come back and have very strong rationale for it being a terrible idea, then of course I wouldn't want them to waste their time on a pilot project. But I think right now the decision to pursue a report and have the pilot project built into that as part of a recommendation or how that might look lines up very well with the timing in terms of the seasons, and it perhaps gives a bit of guidance. So instead of staff coming back with a report in general about keeping hens in Orangeville, this is a way to have an entry level sort of discussion. But I'd of course like to hear Mr. Jones's direction, or Mr. Osmond, whoever this may fall under. And then through you to Deputy Mayor McIntosh, I think the duration of that program would have to be determined through the staff report process. I've heard of 18 months, I've heard of 24 months. We would definitely nail down the duration of that program so that people knew what timeframes they were working within, and we made sure that we got all the information that was relevant to the study within that period. But I wouldn't venture to know what the right length of time would be for, you know, the number we're going to have in town necessarily. So I would hope that would be part of the conclusions of the staff report. Hope that answers it.
Very good. Any other further comment from councillors? I, for one, would be supportive of a pilot project. I think that's the way to go here. So, okay, so we have a motion on the floor here. Oh, sorry, Councillor Taylor?
Thank you, Your Worship. Would we not just tie in, I know it's a notice of motion, but why do we need to go through that formality? Wouldn't we just tie this in with this presentation tonight and vote on the notice of motion? I know it's not necessarily in here, but I don't see a need to talk about it again in 2 weeks. I don't know what the motion would be here, but, well, it's a notice of motion, so you're...
No, I gave notice last meeting.
Oh, so we are going to vote on this?
Vote on it tonight, yeah.
Okay. But wouldn't we just put, I'm sorry, Your Worship, wouldn't we just put it together then, right now?
Madam Clerk?
Certainly, it's up to council if they want to bring the matter forward up on the agenda. You can do that with the consent of council. You can do that. I would suggest, though, that you may want to look at the animal control bylaw in whole, and you are dealing with a report regarding a bylaw work plan, regulatory bylaw work plan. So I would suggest that you perhaps have that bylaw regulatory work program discussion and see how you could perhaps roll in Councillor Peters' notice of motion at that time.
Okay. So does that mean a deferral then? Is that what you're saying? Or okay.
Just right now, you just receive the delegation and carry on with your agenda. And then when we get to the report with respect to the bylaw work plan, you can certainly raise the
Okay.
notice of motion at that time.
Fair enough. So, okay. Councillor Peters moved to receive this report, seconded by Councillor Taylor. All in favor? Thank you. Okay, so we're moving on to staff reports now, 10.1. Transforming and modernizing the delivery of Ontario's building code. Recommendation that report IS Building BLDG-2019-05, transforming and modernizing the delivery of Ontario's building code service be received. Mr. Ewald, did you want to chirp in on this at all, or are you?
As you can see, it was a fairly lengthy
Report.
bit of information that was provided. I don't know that I can really add anything to that, but if there are any questions that came out of what was provided.
Okay. Councillor Peters.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you, I know this isn't a topic that will interest too many people, but perhaps for the public's general consumption of this report, which again is in the weeds a little bit, but it's my understanding that there's a nominal fee being added to building permits to account for sort of an administrative and education component to the larger realm that is building code enforcement. Is that the gist of it? Just so everyone sort of gets a sense of what this, how this may relate to them in the future?
That is correct. Should they proceed with this and create this not-for-profit organization, there would be a fee that would be added onto the current fee structure that the town has at the moment. They have estimated that amount would be 0.016% of what our current fees are. So on a project that is, say, valued at $500,000, I believe the fee would be roughly $80.
Okay, Councillor Peters.
Sorry, and just to follow up again, just so, again, the public's clear, that fee would not come to the town, but rather through the town to another association, correct? That wouldn't be built into your budgeting per se, economically speaking?
That is correct. It would basically just be filtered through the town, but then remitted to this administrative authority that they're planning on forming.
Thank you very much.
Very good. Any further comment from council members? A motion to receive this report. Councillor Peters, seconded by Deputy Mayor McIntosh. All in favor? Thank you. 10.2, update to program criteria and the financial assistance policy. Recommendation that report CPS TF 2019-024 regarding update to the program criteria and the financial assistance policy be received, and that the community grant program eligibility criteria be updated as outlined in report CPS TF 2019-024, and that policy be amended to implement a rolling program that would allow the program to stay open until the funds are exhausted. Any comments from council members? Councillor Sherwood.
Yes, Your Worship, through you to the clerk. In the actual policy itself, go quickly, Debbie, here. Number 7, there's a line that says the funding allocation for any one event shall not exceed $1,000. And we have exceeded $1,000 on many occasions.
Okay, that's with respect to the sports. It's a different grant program. There are 2 grant programs that are covered off in that particular policy, and that's with respect to the sports program.
Thank you for that
You're
clarification.
Okay. Councillor Peters.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I definitely approve and support some of the changes that have been made to the policy, and I know this was a particular sticking point of Councillor Taylor at the last budget session. The one piece I'd just like to discuss a little bit is sort of the rolling program piece. I understand we'll set a budget for the year. The applications will come in, we'll address them at the budget time. What I'd like to avoid is knowing that there's some extra there in the rolling fund and getting lots of people coming out from the woodwork trying to scoop up the remaining dollars, so to speak. So I don't know how we curb that or whether or not it would even be an issue. But I like evaluating the grants on their merits at the time of budget. And I just worry that the rolling piece could turn into a bit of a grab as the year comes to a close. And if there's a way to avoid that or not, I'm not sure. But we obviously haven't seen this style of program in the past.
Interesting. Councillor Taylor.
Thank you, Your Worship. First of all, thank you to staff for putting this together. I am aligned overall as well to this, and I think it's something that we've needed. So I'm grateful to have it here. To Councillor Peters' comments, I guess I would feel the same way. Like, I would prefer that we allocate all of the money at budget and not have money sitting around. That said, my struggle with it is, being in a service club myself, we are an organized, disorganized, time-starved bunch. And we don't always hit things. And, you know, we had an example, which I'm not going to single out the group that came that was late. But my goodness, if we didn't approve the service that they supply, there would have been some very disappointed people recently. So I'm not really sure what to do with it, because I would prefer that organizations come to us by a date that's in advance of budget. We allocate whatever it is, the 100,000, 50,000, whatever it is, to these events, and we're done with it, and we don't talk about it. But our municipality doesn't really work that way. So I don't know. I throw it out to the rest of my councillors to kind of debate, but it's a struggle.
Yeah, I think there was a discussion last time about maybe a contingency to sort of, you know, I know in our Lions Club that I'm a member of, there is a contingency carried in case of special circumstances that come to us. So maybe we can work something like that out as we talk about our budget in the next couple of months. Councillor Sherwood.
Yes, Your Worship. My comment is I was a little concerned about the first come, first serve model. Again, it would be like a rush. Let's get it in. Whereas I'm again a little concerned about having an open-ending funding. I'm very supportive of following deadlines and having specific times to make applications. And those that request funding on an annual basis should be quite aware of those deadlines.
And accurate and complete applications, because we saw some
accurate and complete.
issues
But
last year.
again, I'm having a little problem with the first come, first serve, because that just seems a little unfair.
Right. Councillor Andrews.
Thank you very much, Your Worship, and I appreciate Councillor Taylor, Councillor Peters, and also Councillor Sherwood's points. I'm wondering if there had been any consideration to look at 2 juncture points for an opportunity for individuals to apply. Again, you talk about the rolling option, and I really appreciate your firm point about, you know, we got to be steadfast here. And again, we know many of the service clubs here don't necessarily operate the same way that we do. They do so much good work, but sometimes the house is operating a little differently. And I think if there was a way that maybe we had 2 juncture points for submissions, I mean, it's just a thought, but I don't know what your thoughts would be on that.
Councillor Peters.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And along that lines, Councillor Andrews, perhaps through you to Ms. McKinney, could you advise on, maybe this year is a bit of an odd one because the policy is just coming to fruition, but what would be the intended application date and time frame on an annual basis for this program moving forward?
Thank you, through your worship. The goal would be to continue to keep the structure where we prefer that people come forward during the budget process. The concept behind the rolling model was listening in retrospect to the videos on the discussion about people coming in year for additional requests, be it for contingency or otherwise, and then trying to find other funding sources to keep the door open so that you have it contained in one fund. So in summary, ideally through the budget process, but recognizing, to your point, that people aren't always necessarily getting their applications in on time, or sometimes additional things come up in year for those groups, that it's flexibility. It doesn't result in council trying to find other lines to allocate funds from.
Okay. So would somebody like to make a motion here or a friendly amendment to this in any way? Councillor Taylor.
I don't think we need to make an amendment. I just think it's something we need to be aware of and work together as a team when we're dealing with this. I'm comfortable with what's put forward here. I want to make sure everybody understands the issues and the pitfalls when it comes up as we deal with it at budget. So, you know, I guess I'd put forward the motion that we accept as is.
Okay, we have a seconder for that? Deputy Mayor McIntosh? Any further comment? All in favor? Opposed? Counselor Sherwood is opposed. Okay, moving on to 10.3, Civil Marriage Ceremony Services. Recommendation that report CPSCL 2019-022 regarding civil marriage ceremony services be received, and that the following changes be made to the Civil Marriage Ceremony Services Program commencing January 1st, 2020. Ceremony services be offered on-site only to a maximum of 2 Fridays a month, and the fee for an on-site civil marriage ceremony be established by bylaw at $350, and that staff bring forward a bylaw for council's consideration to establish a new fee for an on-site civil marriage ceremony upon conclusion of the prescribed notice period. That staff issue a request for informal quotes in accordance with the town's procurement policy to retain the services of a qualified officiant, and that staff report back in November 2020 if any further changes to the program are recommended. We have a motion to approve this. Deputy Mayor McIntosh, any comment here at all? Seconded by Councillor Andrews. All in favor? Thank you. Okay, 10.4. This is, we talked a little bit about this earlier, our regulatory bylaw review work plan. And the recommendation that reports CPSL CL 2019-021 and CPSL CL 2019-024 regarding the regulatory bylaw review work plan be received, and the staff bring forward a bylaw to increase dog licensing fees effective January 1st, 2020, and the council directs staff to report back on the various regulatory bylaws in accordance with the following schedule for the remainder of the council term. And we have what staff is recommending is the priority for bylaw review. So we've got some councillors wish to weigh in. Deputy Mayor McIntosh.
Thank you, Your Worship. One item in particular, the pet shop licensing bylaw. I know we had great discussions on that at the beginning of the year. I just think putting it off that long is doing ourselves no favors. Also, the people that it will ultimately affect, I think we owe it to them to bring it sooner than a year and a half from now almost. I would recommend that it's early 2020 that this particular bylaw gets brought up. I know staff, you know, it's a lot of work for staff, but they have to look no further than Toronto, Brampton, Waterloo, and Cambridge to get the bylaws that have this in. So I would like to see that particular item, for one, be moved up to early 2020.
Okay. Let's hear from Councillor Peters.
I'll be brief. It was already brought up before, but I think the hen issue coupled with Councillor Taylor's pigeon issue all fall within the animal control bylaw. I would obviously advocate for that one to be brought to early 2020, especially if the pilot program was going to roll out for the spring of 2020. Now, recognizing that, we probably have to have a discussion about which ones will get bumped, because we can't ask for them all to be done in such a quick time frame. So I'll leave that challenge to the group, but I think animal control should be brought forward.
Councillor Sherwood.
Yes, Your Worship. Through you to the clerk. I know back in January I put forward a motion to have the staff review the dog license fee. And having looked through the report, I can see that our current fees kind of seem to be in line with similar areas. So I don't know if I'm really in support of actually increasing it. But perhaps the clerk can clarify. Did you speak to the OSPCA, and were they wanting an increase? Because to support an increase, the revenue is actually going to the OSPCA, and it's not coming to the town revenue. So that's why I'm not really in support of an increase. I know I just asked to look for the fees, and I was really wanting to just see if we were comparable.
So yes, we did touch base with the OSPCA. Of course, because it is revenue generating for them, they would be favorable for an increase in the actual fee. And we provided the information with respect to what the fees are in the surrounding municipalities, and staff are recommending a minor increase. However, it is up to council if they want to implement the increase at this time or not. And certainly if council does not want to do so at this time, it can be brought forward at a later date.
Madam Clerk, there's been something in the news in the last several weeks about the province putting a new animal control force together. Do you have any further information about that, and will that have any impact on our municipality? Will we have to cover any of those charges?
The program that you're referring to that the province is putting forward is the Provincial Animal Welfare Services program, welfare system. And at this time, I don't see where there's going to be a direct impact in terms of the services that we currently deliver. What will happen is that if you have a complaint about animal welfare, you do call this particular agency which is being established through the province.
Will there be an officer in Orangeville then?
My understanding at this time is there isn't necessarily going to be an officer in Orangeville. However, they will respond to calls across the province of Ontario.
Okay. Thank you. So, Councillor Sherwood, you're questioning why the dog fee is increased when it's not going to affect our tax revenue at all. So, yeah, I kind of on your team on that one. Okay. Yes, Madam
The only
Clerk.
thing I might add is, and of course, Mr. Osmond could interject if I have given any incorrect information coming forward. We do have a current agreement with the OSPCA, which I believe comes due for renewal in 2022 or 2023. So they are bound right now to the fees that the town does impose. So typically, I would assume that during the review of that particular agreement with the OSPCA with respect to the delivery of the services, conversations will be had as it relates to the actual fees for dog licensing. So if council chooses not to move forward at this time, it will be raised again at the time of negotiations of that particular agreement.
And to what level do we subsidize the Orangeville SPCA right now? Do you know, Mr. Osmond?
Through your worship, there is the subsidy to the OSPCA is that we pay for service and we provide the building itself. They pay for the actual operations of the building. Our building piece is a structural, any capital works on the building we cover. Their existing building.
Okay. I just wanted to also make another comment. I had discussions earlier today with the clerk and with CAO Brennan about this bylaw rework plan, review work plan. And the fact of the matter is that we only have a certain amount of hours in the day for town staff to work on these things. So we talked this morning about maybe the need for a contract person to help, accelerate the review of these plans and these bylaws. So I don't know going into our budget session if town council has any appetite for that or not. But if we want to accelerate this, there's only so many people working on it, and they've got full-time jobs doing work every day. So bylaw review is part of their job, but this is the reality of time allocation right now. So just wanted to put that out there that, if we want to accelerate this, we may need to throw some more resources, and it could be a contract period of a year or something like that to try and review these in a more expeditious manner. Councillor Sherwood.
Yes, Your Worship. I'm just going to go back about the dog license, and then I promise that's the end of it. I had heard from several residents that they actually thought our fees were too high. So this is where I'm having a little bit of a difficulty with increasing it. And when I look online and think, okay, I can license my dog in Mona Township for $10 or $20, or East Halifax at $10, again, to up it up. So I'm hoping my fellow councils will support us that we leave it as status quo and then consider that with the next negotiations and not support a recommendation for an increase.
Okay, so that's a friendly amendment to this. Deputy Mayor McIntosh, are you supporting of that? Okay, so can we have a vote on that particular adjustment to this proposed work plan. Councillor Peters.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just on that, I don't know if that's being separated from the other piece of the motion. Is that the intent? I'll let you figure
Madam
that
Clerk,
out, and I'll.
Madam Clerk.
Okay. Sorry.
Yeah, if I may suggest, perhaps you just want to take a separate vote on that particular motion. And
Right.
so, and you're actually, it's not really an amendment because it's contradictory to what's on the floor. So if the mover and seconder of putting the motion, the original motion on the floor are fine, we'll just separate that out and then just take a new motion with
the
respect
balance.
to just not changing the fees at this time.
Right.
Okay?
Okay.
Sorry, and then if I could, I had sort of comment on that issue myself. So I don't think, I see relatively that the fees are a little bit higher. We also have sort of a more local service. I think Orangeville benefits from that. I think the work that the OSPCA does is very valuable and worthwhile. And the fee hasn't been updated since 2003. So I really don't think it's unreasonable to go from 25 to 30 after a 15-year hiatus. So I wouldn't be supporting a status quo.
Very good. Councillor Taylor.
Thank you, Your Worship. I just kind of want to echo Councillor Peters' comments, and I apologize, Councillor Sherwood. I just feel like I don't know enough about this one to vote against what has been put in front of us at this time. And given that it's so small, it feels like we should just let this go as recommended here. I don't know if we could delay, or if we go to vote, I guess I'll vote with Councillor Peters, and I mean no disrespect, Councillor Sherwood. I just wanted to share a bit of my rationale.
Right. My personal thoughts are, I think we probably got dog owners out there who are not licensed, and that, you know, we continue to increase it. There's a likelihood that they will continue to not become licensed. So I would support leaving it where it is right now. So. Okay, let's call a vote. We have a motion on the floor to leave that particular issue at status quo. All in favor? Opposed? Councillor Taylor and Councillor Peters are opposed. That motion passes. Deputy Mayor McIntosh.
Thank you, Worship. I'm not sure if this is the way to go about it as well, is to make a motion that the pet shop licensing bylaw be completed in early 2020 or as soon as possible.
Yeah, Madam Clerk, maybe you can give us a little guidance here, because there's a couple of other councillors who were requesting changes to the schedule. Animal control bylaw was 2023. So is this basically swapping something for something? Is that what we're doing here?
Well, for
Madam
the
Clerk?
most, yes, for Mr. Mayor, for the most part, it is swapping for swapping, except for I would appreciate when you're doing your swapping, if you perhaps maybe just check in, because there are certain bylaws that do take, involve more research and definitely do require more public consultation with respect to the issue at hand. If I can, I'll mention, like typically like an animal control bylaw, a sign bylaw, will garner significant public interest, and I do recommend that as part of that process, even though our notice policy doesn't speak to it, that as part of that process, when doing bylaws of that nature, that there is a public meeting to garner input from the public as to what their thoughts are on the bylaw itself. So, for example, swapping out a animal control bylaw, perhaps for a pet shop licensing bylaw, I may need to go, it's not an equivalent, and it's
Right.
not like a 1-on-1 ratio, we might be looking 1 to 2.
Right.
So if you could bear that in mind, and I'm happy to answer any questions in terms of the involvement in the different types of regulatory bylaw review.
Looking at 2019, we've got wastewater rates and supply and install water meters seem to be very important issues we probably have to deal with now. The property standards bylaw, again, probably an important thing to look at. Traffic encumbering highway, can you elaborate on that, please?
Sure, I can. In discussions with the Infrastructure Services Department, there have been some circumstances where we've found that we need to just make an amendment to the traffic bylaw that is very sites, it's specific in nature as it relates to encumbering on the highway. So dealing with the ability to deal with perhaps equipment or other things that might be interfering with snow clearing operations. So that is currently being worked on. I can tell you everything in 2019 is already in the works and will be coming forward to you within the next couple months. It may be early in 2020, but everything in the queue for 2019 is currently being worked on.
All right, so looking at 2020, so can you just touch on display of merchandise on sidewalks and prohibit sale of goods from highway? Can you talk to those two, please?
So with respect to the display of merchandise on sidewalks, you may recall that I think it was probably about 3 months ago now, it was when I first started, the BIA was here with respect to expanding the limits of what can be displayed on the sidewalk within the area, the BIA area. So they are to actually report back on the success of that particular program. And if it is successful, then they would be asking council to look at expanding the pilot, I will say, on a more permanent nature. I can say that that is a bylaw that wouldn't require a great deal of work. It would be an amendment that could be done rather quickly. And the other one?
Sale of goods, services from highway.
That is actually when we went through the review process, working with the other staff. Infrastructure Services is working, and bylaw enforcement has also identified the need to update the traffic bylaw. So as part of that, we pulled in all bylaws that deal with our highways, and that would be rolled into the traffic bylaw review. So everything that's related to traffic, which includes the encumbering of highways, which would move forward, but also the sale of goods from highways would roll into the traffic bylaw.
Okay, I'm sorry, I've misread that. So you got traffic, and then you got 3 items below that
Yes,
that are
that's right.
encompassed. Okay, right. And parks bylaw closing times, that wouldn't take too much time either, I presume. No?
Yeah, in fairness
No,
to Ray.
is that a major issue going on here?
In fairness to Mr. Osmond, when we did that particular review, that we did discover that perhaps there needs to be some more regulatory provisions included in our park bylaws, and also perhaps some delegated authority as it relates to the closure of parks and for special events, et cetera. So although that doesn't involve nearly the same amount of work that a traffic bylaw does involve, it is just more than just closing times for parks that need to be added to that particular bylaw.
So I'm just wondering, you know, this animal control bylaw in 2023, we've got issues going on, and this, the chicken bylaw and pigeon bylaw is all part of it, or pigeon control. And Deputy Mayor McIntosh's pet shop licensing bylaw request. Do we want to move those ahead into 2020 and then look at bringing in some help to help with these bylaws? Council, I mean, there's really no other way to slice this other than bringing in some contract help, so. Councillor Taylor? You're looking for Clem. Go ahead, sir.
I don't know how I got volunteered there, but it's not lost on me that our staff is overworked or has a long list of things. Perhaps overworked might not be the right word, but there's a long list of things, and people wonder why things take a period of time to get done. We're watching our pennies here and trying to be as efficient as possible with what we're doing. Mm-hmm. I feel, I guess I'm thinking as I'm speaking here, which is dangerous, but I do like what you're saying, Mayor Brown, that we should potentially look at this. I feel like we might be putting the cart before the horse because we're going to have another discussion over the next period of time. As I listen to the clerk, we've got 2019 looked after, so the work is progressing. Perhaps we have to delay this then if that's what you're proposing, and we just get through. I don't think we're going to be very long. We were very efficient last time. I've looked through this budget. I don't think it's a difficult one for us. And potentially we could address what you're suggesting over the next 6 weeks or hopefully 4 weeks
So
and get it done then.
I think you're spot on there. I think if we let this go as it stands right now, with the promise to council members who are concerned that we look at bringing the resources required if we have them available in our budget sessions in the next couple of months, that we can then come back and address this at that time. Does that make sense, Deputy Mayor McIntosh? Yeah? Councilor Peters? Okay, so I think we recognize some of these things have to be accelerated, so, but at this moment, we don't have an answer for funding of doing that. So let's put this off until we, crystallize that money that might be available. Does that sound okay, Madam Clerk? Does that make sense?
Yes. May I just confirm that in terms of expediting a few of the bylaws into the schedule, I'm considering the animal control bylaw and the pet shop licensing bylaw.
Correct.
Otherwise, everything else remains as is.
At this moment, I believe that council is directing you in that fashion. Councilor Taylor.
I just want to make one comment, and it's, I think we're aligned to what you're saying. I just really feel like that election sign bylaw, we cannot move it any later than where it is, because it will put this council in a very awkward position that we're now making recommendations or changes when we potentially could be involved in an election. So I just want to make sure we don't move it. If it goes anywhere, it should go forward, but I think it's right where it should be, and I don't think we should touch it.
Agreed.
But other than that, I'm very comfortable with what the clerk is suggesting. I think it makes a lot of sense.
Okay. So I guess the recommendation is that we accept what staff is suggesting here. We have a motion to that effect. Councilor Andrews, I'm sorry, Councilor Peters wish to weigh in? Sir.
So I just want to make sure we captured the discussion. So my understanding was that the animal control and pet shop bylaw would be accelerated to the degree of which we will determine, the solution through the budget process. But I think having those two brought up was part of, I think, what the Deputy Mayor and I were trying to get into this
Agreed.
motion. So if it could be amended to reflect that, I think that makes
Madam
sense.
Clerk.
Certainly, what I will note as part of your recommendation is that you're adopting the schedule as is. However, I will come back in terms of an approach for dealing with the animal control bylaw and the pet shop licensing bylaw within this term of council. Well, actually, I think you're looking at next year.
Right.
Okay, and I will add
Correct.
in that particular wording.
Right.
Okay.
Okay. So we had Councilor Andrews, a seconder, Councilor Taylor. All in favor? Thank you. Okay, moving on. We have some correspondence from Michael Chesney of the Orangeville Optimist regarding Christmas in the Park. It's a recommendation that the council approve the request to close Casey Gardens for Christmas in the Park from Friday, November 22nd through to Sunday, January 5th. Is Mr. Chesney in the house? No. Councilor Taylor? Would you like, okay, so there's nobody from the Optimist here to speak to this. It's just, well, we're accepting this and we're approving this. Okay, very good. Councilor Taylor is making the motion, seconded by Councilor Peters. All in favor? Very good. Okay, moving on. Question period. Any members from, yes, sir, would you like to, Mr. Toms?
Good evening, Honorable Mayor Brown and members of council. My name is Alan Toms of 10 Sunset Drive, L9W 2G9. The initial purpose of wanting to appear in front of council this evening is regarding protocol. And listening even to the comments made here this evening, there is a certain amount of protocol. But however, you'll have noticed that with, due to the respect, I opened up with the mayor of our fine town and identified myself with complete address and postal code. During recent council meetings, which I have been in attendance, the protocol and respect seems to be missing. I've failed somehow, even in this regard, involving myself. Therefore, I will make this as short and brief as possible. I observe time and time again of those who wish to monopolize your valuable time by speaking a number of times in one evening. This approach appears to be nothing more than intimidative tactics. I suggest that the council will see through this approach and make the best decisions for the town and its taxpaying residents now and in the future. I really wanted to kind of bring this forward because I'm not sure that the protocol had changed over the years, but what I had noticed that people became very slipshod in terms of identifying not necessarily who they are, but where they're from and so on. I just wondered whether the protocol system here had changed at all. I mean, it's to be respectful of the council and the members and the taxpayers that are here trying to, convey messages or find out information from council. So I just felt it was appropriate time to bring this forward as I watched so many people go around and around as of the last meeting. And I think unfortunately, I took Mayor Brown to task a little bit following that meeting. And it was really what that was meant to do is to try and decide, can we bring the proper protocol back into place for this council chamber?
Right.
That's all I have to say. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Toms. It's, this has been a difficult time for council and for some residents, so, we kept the stopwatch going to some extent, but we did give people additional time. The 3 minutes was not really kept a tight rein on. We did go by. And I know I did suggest that you need to wrap things up in your discussion, so I appreciate that. But procedural bylaw says if you're going to make a delegation and be on the agenda, you have 5 minutes to make your presentation. If it's just a question during question and answer period, it's 3 minutes. And we did play fast and loose with that to some extent. But I do agree with you. We are expecting people to come here and tell us who they are, where they're from, and be completely honest in what they're saying to us and who they are. We'd like them to identify themselves properly. So, Madam Clerk, is there anything in our procedural bylaw about people that wish to speak to council, how they identify themselves?
The procedural bylaw indicates that they have to indicate their first and last names.
That's it.
Yes.
And we're probably, because of privacy issues, not allowed to delve into any deeper. Is that correct?
You would give the individual the opportunity to
Decline
exclude,
if
to
they
decline
wish.
providing their address.
Right.
Yeah, I guess I brought that up situation because in years gone by in other councils, we were actually prompted to provide our name, address, and postal code. Right. And that was a definite prompt before anybody would speak. And one of the things I was finding too is that people were getting up here and starting to run with it before they'd even identified who they were. And I know you brought that forward, Mr. Mayor, to prompt.
I know all of us up here want to know if you're a voter or not. So that's the prime directive.
Yes.
All right.
Okay.
Councillor Taylor wishes to weigh in here. Sir.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Toms. I do appreciate your comments. I'm someone who really enjoys respecting tradition and whatnot. You'll hear me, I refer to the mayor, face to face, I refer to him in some derogatory comments in a good-natured way. But here in council, I like to refer to him as your worship, and I think it's appropriate, and I think it's professional, and I like that tradition of it. However, I do think that a lot of people find the seat that you're sitting in right now very intimidating. And it's always been questionable to me why we ask for their addresses and whatnot. And some people just do not want people to know where they are, and I respect that. And this debate that we're having now, that you're intimating about the police debate, it's ugly. You know, there's people that are very forceful with what their thoughts are. I've got some emails that are, I've not read those type of words before from folks. So when you're up there giving your address and you're in a contentious debate, I don't think people should be expected to do that. I would like them to be from Orangeville. I don't think that we should entertain people talking about our business that live outside of the area, but I don't think we need to know that they live at Zina Street or McCarthy or what have you. So just my thoughts, but I've always been uncomfortable with that. But I would like to know their first name and last name and that they live in town, and we'll have to take them at their word otherwise, but just my 2 cents.
Very good, sir.
Very good, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Thoms. Appreciate that. Is there anybody else that would like to ask a question from the audience? Okay, seeing none. Uh-oh, he's trigger finger. Okay. All right, we have committee and board minutes to receive. We've got 13.1, 13.2, 13.3, and 13.4. Any councillors like to speak to this? Councillor Peters.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's an innocent enough question. I was just waiting for you to get to that number 13. It's actually through you to Councillor Sherwood. I was reading in the BIA minutes, there was mention of a public plaza project, phases 1 and 2. There wasn't any elaboration on that. Are you at liberty to share what that might be? Is that a project of the BIA that people might be interested in?
Sorry, let me, I've got to get, Councillor Andrews, I'm going to have to
That's fine, I'll get bumped.
delete you, sorry. All right, Councillor Sherwood.
Through you, Your Worship, to Councillor Peters. It was actually a private citizen who has a plan or a vision that would brought it forth because the vision is allocated in the downtown area. The particular individual is planning on presenting to council. It was recommended by the BIA to speak to the Legion because they were talking about it being located in Alexander Park and wanting all of everything out there, the cenotaph, everything relocated. So therefore, our recommendation was to speak to the Legion. It's just a vision, it's just a plan, and this individual is also away for most of the winter, so you can probably see it coming to council in the near future in 2020.
Very good. Councillor Andrews.
Thank you very much, Your Worship, and I wasn't bounced or bumped, but have the opportunity of at least thanking Councillor Sherwood for the activity that's happening with the Heritage Committee and Heritage Week. And I encourage those that may not be aware of it, but it has been publicized on the town page, some things that are happening there with the Heritage Week, an opportunity for some photographs from members of our community. If you happen to have some photographs of this community's wonderful history, to certainly forward those to the appropriate individuals, and I guess Councillor Sherwood might be able to provide who that individual would be. And my other point is to Mr. Osmond, in the absence of Councillor Post's absence, any update on the Abilities Expo? I know it was talked about in October, but again, some residents have reached out to me and were curious to see if there had been any news about that particular event that's been talked about.
Your Worship, through to Councillor Andrews. It's still being talked about. They're still looking at going ahead with it. I understand it's on the agenda for accessibility, how they're going to proceed. And we're also looking at doing some work with the county onto it. So it's kind of, right now it's still in its development
It's in the
stage.
works. Yep. Great, thank you.
Very good. So can I have a motion to receive these committee and board minutes? Deputy Mayor McIntosh, seconded by Councillor Sherwood. All in favor? Thank you. So item 14, this is our notice of motion at meeting regarding backyard chickens. We've already had a presentation tonight. Councillor Peters, would you like to elaborate?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I don't think there's too much more to say, other than that the bylaw discussion is obviously forthcoming. We have put some dates in here with the goal of having that pilot program sort of align with what you might call the growing season, sort of the people that may want to partake during the summer, for example, through the rental program, and to get their hens established in nice weather as opposed to what we're dealing with at the moment, perhaps. The only other piece I'd add to that, and this can of course be in discussions with staff after the fact, but I do believe the committee would be willing to do quite a bit of legwork on this issue, hopefully relieving staff of at least some of that research component. So with that said, I'll dive into the motion and happy to take any questions. Whereas food security and urban agriculture are an important aspect of a sustainable food system, and whereas the Orangeville Sustainable Neighborhood Action Plan, or SNAP, endorses the Headwaters Food Charter and Action Plan, and whereas the Headwaters Food Charter and Action Plan emphasizes food access and equity, and whereas local community interest in backyard chickens has increased in the last several years, and whereas many urban centers in Canada have implemented pilot programs to determine the feasibility of backyard chickens in a particular municipality, therefore be it resolved that Council directs staff to investigate and report on the potential for residents to keep backyard chickens, and that staff work with Sustainable Orangeville to create a pilot program for backyard chickens, and that the report be presented to Council by March 2020, so that implementation of a pilot program could potentially begin in May of 2020.
Councillor Peters, there seems to be a lot of positives that have been brought forward. The only negative that I saw doing some research is some concern about avian diseases. And can you elaborate on that at all? I know you're not a member of the Center for Disease Control or anything, but perhaps you can.
I can't, unfortunately. That hasn't sort of surfaced as a major concern during the research at the committee level. I think certainly that would have been a fundamental piece of reporting done by other municipalities prior to entering programs such as this. So I believe that research is out there and would be accessible, and we could certainly include that as part of the information, because we want residents to be comfortable with the concept from all aspects, health included.
Yeah, these kind of things happen when animals aren't cared for properly. So I don't know going forward, and if it was in Ms. Waters' presentation, but maybe there needs to be some sort of inspection of the facility, whatever, the chicken coop, going forward. Councillor Peters.
Yes, through you, there definitely would be. I think enforcement of protocol and education of participants in the pilot program to make sure that it is run as smoothly as possible. If at that point the community has established their opinion on it, obviously that's why it's just a pilot program. But there are several dozens of examples across Ontario that we would draw from, pulling all of the best pieces and conducting interviews if necessary with those in bylaw enforcement or other regulatory bodies to make sure that if implemented in Orangeville, it's done properly. And as Ms. Waters alluded to, getting all your neighbors on board is a fundamental component. So this is not a renegade operation. This is a community operation.
Right. And it's hens only, so noise level is kept down. Councillor Taylor.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. I'd just like to say I do have a bit of reluctance about this. I don't love the idea of chickens in backyards and whatnot. I think when I think about the whole idea of it, I'm a bit chicken about it. But I like the spirit of where we're going, and I think it's something we should investigate. I'd like to know more about it as we go forward. So, in confidence of what you're trying to do, I'll vote in favor of it, but I do have reluctance to it. So I'd like to learn more, and I look forward to seeing what it is, and I assume we'll vote again when we find out what's happening. We're not going to go en masse. We're just going to go with a truncated version of this. So I'll vote in favor of it at this point, but I'd like to learn more. I don't know a lot about it, so.
And I'm with you, Councillor Taylor. I think it's interesting. I'd like to see it, but having a pilot project really allows some data and some, negative issues to be flushed out, if there is any. And I think we'll be able to monitor this and make a final decision to finalize a bylaw going forward, right? So, very good. Okay, so you're Councillor Peters making a motion. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Andrews. All in favor? Very good. Okay, new business. Does anybody have any new business? Oh, we got a couple here. Councillor Sherwood was quick on the button there. You should play Jeopardy or something, you know. Good for you.
If only it worked on the back rack. Yes, Your Worship, just to follow up on what Councillor Andrews had touched on lately, there has been a public news release, but I'm going to further explain about jumping on board with Heritage Orangeville. We're going to be, we're quite excited. Even though Heritage Week is in February, we're trying to get quite actively involved right now to get this thing going. We're having our first historical photography project. We're going to have an exhibit in the atrium, and we're quite excited about that. So we're encouraging any individuals, if you have any special historical photograph that you would wish to honor or preserve for future generations, that could be historical photographs of people, places, building, events, any special memories. We would really be honored to host that with our historical exhibit during Heritage Week. And we would encourage if you could give like a personal description and email it to heritage@orangeville.ca before December 31st, and we will proudly show all these treasured photographs. And then after that, they will be saved and archived in our museum for future generations.
There's already been some amazing photos posted on Facebook. It's very interesting to see. Yeah. There was one, it was the first paving of Orangeville. It was concrete, actually, and you saw a wagon there with bags of concrete, and I think it was around 1920, something like that, Broadway was first turned into a hard surface. So, yeah, great. I'm looking forward to seeing those photos. Councillor Andrews.
Thank you very much, Your Worship, and I'd just like to take this moment to thank the Kinsmen and the Kinettes for a fabulous Santa Claus parade, where some of us on council had the opportunity to participate and certainly celebrate the time of the season with so many wonderful people of our community. So to parlay that into discussion that we've had on Where is Santa, we have had a number of people who've stepped forward and have asked, where is Santa going to be this year? And through you, Your Worship, would you be at liberty to share any news on that to those in the gallery and those that might be watching?
Yeah, well, there's been some interesting discussions going on. Of course, the Orangeville Mall, under new ownership, has decided to close the interior portion of the mall and turning that building into more of a big box retail center. So across the front on the First Street elevation, there'll be, let me think, 7 big box stores, including the ones that are existing there. But as you go from south to north, Metro, Shoppers, Drug Mart, PetSmart will be moving over from the other mall into this mall, Marshalls, and then we've got HomeSense, Sport Check, and Michaels. Along the other elevation, the Hanson elevation, where the discount store is in there, they're going to be putting new storefronts along that elevation. So those stores will be accessible directly to outside. So for instance, the shoe repair fellow is in negotiation to move out there, so he'll have, as are the dental office and the nail salon, which are kind of tucked around behind the back of Metro, so they'll be moving out, onto that elevation. So as a result of that, unfortunately, and the mall management and ownership is very upset about having to close that. So we've had some discussions and looked around town at where the best facility is, and this morning I was at Alder, actually Friday was the first discussion. Councillor Andrews and myself were out with Mr. Osmond talking about a number of issues, and we were kind of trying to scope out a position at Alder where Santa could set up, and we've had further discussions today, and I think the likelihood, the location is going to be, I think, on the main level, near the main entrance. The Santa's set, so to speak, the equipment that was available will be made available this year, and we're working on the final details, but it'll likely be in place by tomorrow. We'll be able to make some sort of formal announcement and get our town communications director involved in announcing this. But the mall has graciously offered to pay for some of the expense. F-stop cameras involved, and they're going to be doing the portraits as per last year. So it's a good decision for the town, I think, to make that happen. And some of you may notice that this cropped up on the Toronto Star feed over the weekend. You know, so Santa is coming to Orangeville. We can announce officially that he's going to be coming. So looking forward to nailing down the details. But it'll be a similar situation. There'll be hours set there, and Santa will be sitting with an elf or two to help with some photographs for the kids. So that's a good news story. Thanks for bringing that up, Councillor Taylor.
That went on for so long, I nodded off. I just wanted to congratulate Theatre Orangeville. Saturday night, I could not go to the parade because I was volunteering with Theatre Orangeville, but Victorian Christmas ran, and it was sold out and a smashing success. So congratulations to David Nairn, who is quite under the weather, so I wish him well. And then the second piece is I wanted to mention to everyone that the Transportation Committee meets tomorrow night. It's open to the public. People are welcome to come and see what's going on there. And just to counsel, more to come, but in the last meeting we had, we all voted to refer some items to the Transit Committee. It's come to my attention in some discussions with Mr. Lackey and Mr. Jones that might not make sense for this Transportation Committee because of the mandate and when we need to close that Transportation Committee. So we will discuss it tomorrow night, and you know, we'll come back to council, I guess myself and the Deputy Mayor, and have something for you to consider about what next steps might be in terms of the mandate of that committee. But we'll discuss that, and again, the public is welcome to attend.
Right. So I see on 10.4, taxi licensing bylaw is in there. That was, I guess, at one point talked about bringing into your committee, but it's a big ask, isn't it? So, right. So, okay, very good. Anybody else with any new business? I did want to bring up a point. Mr. Brennan and I were made aware of an issue that came up in our development charge consultation, and it was regarding police complement. Mr. Brennan, do you have any comment on that? Oh, for crying out loud, look who it is. It's Saint Nick himself. Oh.
Halfway to the North Pole, and my head out said, turn around and go into the Orangeville Council chamber. Mr. Mayor, this better be important while you drank it all the way back here. I was almost home. Mrs. Claus promised me hot chocolate and cookies, and here I am in the council chamber. So all these councils are on my good list, no one's on my naughty list.
Santa, oh, it's so good for you to come in.
Why did you bring me here?
Well, we wanted to announce that we have found a place for you to sit and receive children in Orangeville after some potential issues at our mall. We found a great spot for you at our Alder Street Recreation Center, and all the children are going to be so happy to be able to sit in your lap and tell you what they want for Christmas.
Mr. Mayor, that is such great news. I also want to say I enjoyed your Santa Claus parade. Hope you enjoyed your ride on the pickup truck.
Yeah.
No, none of you can get that for Christmas. Okay, as much as you did like it. Oh, that is great news, Mr. Mayor. I was so worried that the Orangeville Mall is closed. I'd have nowhere to meet and greet all the lovely children of Orangeville. This is by far one of my most favorite communities.
Oh, thank you so much, Santa. So thank you for coming by, and we really appreciate it. And we're looking forward to seeing you starting on Saturday at Alder Street Rec Center. All right.
I'll be there. Thank you.
All the best. Thank you so much. Okay.
And all the best to everybody else in Orangeville. Thank you for inviting me. I gotta go.
Merry Christmas, Santa. Yeah. All right. Thank you.
See everybody Saturday.
Very good. So. How do you follow that one? Mr. Brennan, there was a little hiccup there. Can you just elaborate a little bit on that?
Your Worship, yes, through you. We were just going through some numbers and stuff again today, and we just completed a DC background study. And in that study, it was identified, I'll read the words, by our police services that as we go to growth and build out, it was identified that the need for 3 additional vehicles and car radios, equipment for 7 additional officers, and radio infrastructure has been identified for us to get to growth. So these are some numbers. I think it equated to about $1.6 million as per the police services, as for a DC study. I haven't had a chance to reach out to the chief yet, but I will, because those numbers and those additional asks for positions and vehicles have not been identified in the police budget or to the consultant. So the projections of numbers have not included this stuff that was done by our consultant. I reached out to the consultant today, and he confirmed that they were not identified.
So
I will reach out.
How did they end up in the DC consultant's report? Did that consultant consult with the police service, or how did it end up?
You're correct, Your Worship, that all of the department heads and the different stakeholders would have been consulted and briefed by the consultant for our DC study, and this information would have came from the stakeholders at that time.
Right.
So right now, we don't, I'm not sure what was presented to the Police Services Board with the new proposed budget, with the numbers, what was included, but we want to try to clarify this before, maybe before your vote at least on the 25th.
Okay. All right, thank you. Any other new business? Anybody wishes? Oh, here we go, Councillor Taylor. Go ahead.
I'm sorry, Mr. Brennan. I don't understand what you're telling us. Can you just go back and re-explain that to me again? So you've got, what has happened here? Sorry. Just go slow.
Your Worship, through you to, I'm not sure if I can do it justice from the explanation, but when we have a development charges for growth, every 5 years we have a development charge study. And what the consultant will do is will bring the key stakeholders together, and they will identify costs that each department or each stakeholder is going to incur in the next number of years. And some of these costs are what we can claim through development charges, i.e., you know, if we have to build an extra road, if we have to plant expansion. Some of these things are based on growth, so we can charge it through development charges. In, I think it's section 5.2.2, during the last development charge study, which is just done this year, it was identified under the police section that the need for 3 additional vehicles and car radios, equipment for 7 additional officers, and radio infrastructure has been identified to service the anticipated population growth. It was a growth of 1.9 million, but then it recommends that because the building itself was built a little larger than required right now, but required for growth, or projected growth population, there were some adjustments done. And under the DC study, it shows that a $1.6 million growth-related policing service needs going forward. What made it complicated is that the consultant was not made aware of this, or it was not brought up during the discussions.
The police consultant was not.
Correct. Mr. The Pomax, the gentleman that was the consultant that's been doing the pricing evaluations for policing services for the town. So this is a different scenario. I have not had a chance to reach out to the chief yet to get their view on it. I don't know if members of the board's got a different view, but or an explanation. We're not certain, but it's just throwing a little uncertainty into the true cost analysis going forward.
Right. Okay. So hopefully we can get something from you in the next couple of days on this, some clarity? Okay, very good. Councillor Sherwood.
Your worship, through you to Mr. Brennan, if this ultimately could affect the police costing, are we better to delay the vote until we see if this affects any figures for the consultant?
Your worship, through you, I would like the opportunity to speak with the chief first. From there, I can speak with the consultant. It may be a simple, we may still be able to look at saying, these are the costs as per the approved structure right now and the number of officers at the police, the Orangeville Police Services. So as the consultant has said, Polmax, is that he looked at our status quo right now and not increasing the number of officers going forward to do the analysis. So the analysis is based on as we are today, projected with the costs incurred in out into 16 years or whatever. It did not include extra bodies, an extra police ask under the capital projections. Not this ask anyway. So I would like to speak with the chief tomorrow to see if I can get some indication of where this is and where it's going now or next. And then I can talk to the consultant as well to see what take he has on it and what type of projection difference it may incur.
So just again, for some clarity, the number of 3% was talked about on addition per year, 3%, which would have covered cost of living increases and sort of operational cost increases, but that did not include complement increases. Is that correct?
Your worship, that is correct. The projected cost for the Orangeville Police Services is based on the 42 officers, what the staff is right now, uniform officers going forward, or the whole complement. Of course, you're also projecting your civilian complement as well, but it did not include additional officers potentially.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Taylor.
Again, we're a year into this as councillors, so I think it's okay to say you're surprised by things or you don't understand things. But to me, I sit on that board. First I've heard of it tonight. There hasn't been anything brought up to us at the Police Service Board by any stretch. I guess the next thought I would have is I don't understand why you're just bringing up the Orangeville Police, because it would be the town of Orangeville, if that is a requirement that was put forward, either force would require these extra officers, correct?
I would presume so. However, as we've learned from the OPP billing model, they bill based on growth in the number of doors, right? So once you get past the transition period, OPP grows their dollar revenue by addition of doors and the growth in the community. So I don't know that their numbers would change at all. So anyway,
Is that correct, Mr. Brennan?
Your worship, I would say that these numbers, they're in two different places now. One is in the Development Charges Act and our bylaw that was passed, identifying this cost. So in theory, our finance department can start collecting some of these monies. If this is going to change, I would, we would have to talk then to our consultant to put the development charges together, and do we need an amendment to it? If the Orangeville Police are now saying that we don't need those extra officers going forward, then I would say we probably would have to go in here and everything status quo on the work that Polmax have done. If we're saying that from a policing perspective, from an Orangeville Policing Services perspective, if they're saying that they need this extra additional stuff, be it vehicles, 3 vehicles, or the equipment for 7 additional officers and stuff, and then new radio equipment, that would increase the cost of our Orangeville Police Services going forward into the future. I am not certain because of not that I'm not certain, but if you look at the Ontario Provincial Police billing model, it's post-2024, if council were to elect to go with Orangeville Ontario Provincial Police, their contract is not on FTEs. It's based on a call for service. So you have a base property value, and then you have a calls to service value. And outside of that, again, of course, is the courtyard, courtroom security, and transportation of prisoners. So if this is an additional ask that has not been included, then I will clarify with the chief if it is going to be an ask going forward, and we can ask the consultant what type of additional cost might it be. Looking at right now, it appears that it's about a $1.6 million ask, according to the development charges study.
Your
Okay.
worship, if I may?
Yes.
And how did, I think it's really important that we all understand this. I don't care how dumb I look in front of all of Orangeville right now. If we're going to be making a vote next week about something like this, and it's coming up tonight, we should understand it. I don't understand, I mean, no disrespect, Mr. Brennan, I don't understand where this came from. Who's brought this forward? To make sure I totally get it? The development?
A citizen read the development charge bylaw and sent an email to me.
Oh, and sent it in.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's how it
To me, again, if it's one, the other would have the same. I don't know why one force would require, my math would be 42 plus 7 is 49, when the other force would require 42 based on calls of service. The calls of service are the calls of service. You have 42 on one or you have 49 on the other. That doesn't make any sense. This is muddying the waters. And again, I mean, no disrespect to you, Mr. Brennan. I think very highly of you, as you know. But we're up against a vote, which I've spent considerable time on, as have all of you, and now we have this thrown at us at the last minute. You know, we can't go into a vote 1 week out and not have the information properly digested. Like at this point, I would imagine with 7 days to go, people are very close to making up their minds about what you're going to be doing about the future of our town. And to not have a great understanding of what that is, I'm not in with this. This is not right. So I'm disappointed to be sitting here tonight 1 week out and not having it. And again, Mr. Brennan, I feel like I need to keep saying it. I mean, no disrespect to you. I think you're a great leader of the town. We're very fortunate to have you. You're the messenger, and that's it. But if I sound emotional, I am. I want to make the right decision here, and it muddies everything, and social media will be a blitz, and I won't be able to answer the questions. So it's disappointing.
Very good. Councilors? Well, I think we need to ask for some clarity here, Mr. Brennan. I think come November 25th, we're going to have a discussion about this before any vote happens. And, you know, if there's a feeling at that time that we need to delay for a week, then we might have to delay. But, Councillor Andrews. I'm sorry.
That's okay. No, that's okay. Through your worship, I'm wondering, to your point that you've just indicated, I'm wondering if a motion to delay the vote by a week would be in order because of, you know, the new information we've just received. Would that be something that members of council would entertain, or are we going to stick with the original motion that Councillor Sherwood put on the table?
Well, myself, I'd like to just carry on, but I mean, if there's additional information that's shared with us in the next couple of days, we can always make that decision on Monday, right, to defer at that point. But the clarity here is the OPP numbers aren't changing. The OPS numbers, I guess, are going to change. But.
Your Worship, if you don't mind, and to Councillor Taylor, I do not take your comments as disrespectful. It is a concern. It's been bought at the last minute, and but I think Council needs to know, in all fairness to our OPS members, this may have changed in the last number of weeks. This may have not have been presented as such, in which case, then the evaluations that Pomax Consulting has done, there's no difference. The other side of it is flip as well. If OPS says, no, we're going to need these extra officers and extra equipment going forward, then one can only conclude that the cost of OPS services is going to increase by that amount. So the delta between what's been recognized potential savings or estimated savings from now till then can change with that amount. I would agree with Your Worship, maybe if there's other stuff that's coming up between now and Monday, maybe at that time, Monday, you can make that decision to defer it by a week or so. But I will be reaching out to the chief tomorrow morning, and I'm sure with some conversations that we can come to a resolve of what this really means and or what it doesn't mean.
Okay, Councillor Peters.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Mr. Brennan, can you clarify sort of why this cost is being broached in the DC rebate study? Is there a portion of DCs that go towards policing? And if so, are those costs just being offset through the DC process? What's the relevance of the DC study quoting a police growth number?
Some of the services, including policing, from the growth perspective, would be eligible to claim some development charge money. So the people coming in doing the building in our municipality will have to pay DC rates, and some of it would go towards policing. And that's where the numbers are fixed in the DC study and the DC bylaw.
Councillor Taylor.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm just thinking out loud here. Earlier tonight, we had a modest group of people in here, and that would be a typical council meeting. Next Monday night, this is going to be packed. We cannot make a decision to defer next Monday night based on the information we have. Even if Mr. Brennan has the discussion tomorrow, we need to make a decision tonight as a council. This is when we're together. This is it. We don't have the authority to do it through email or phone meetings. It has to be done in a council meeting. I won't be back here over the next 7 days. I do not have the ability to do so. We need to make a motion tonight. I don't know what that motion is. We only have till December, is it 10th or 9th? 10th? But I don't see how we can go forward with next Monday given this information.
Right. Okay. I'm just looking at our council schedule here. So, question being, do we want to have a special meeting next week, or do you want to do? We have 25th and 26th, so we could put it to the 26th if you wish. We could put it to the 2nd. Yes, Councillor Sherwood.
Your Worship, the reason I originally had proposed November 25th is because that is the date we're starting into our budgets.
Right.
I would assume, perhaps Mr. Brennan can clarify this, would we be getting to the police part of the budget on Monday night, or is Tuesday night capital or operating? I can't quite remember the schedule, but this ultimately will affect policing, whether we stay with OPP or OPS or go OPP, and that was my original intent. However, I am very concerned about what's been put before us tonight. You know, I am quite concerned and probably very much in favor of delaying it another week, but I want to know how will this work within our budget presentations.
Anything to share with us, Mr. Brennan?
Well, Your Worship, through you, Monday night we're starting off with capital, and operating goes Tuesday. The one thing I would ask this council to remember is, from a police services perspective, we do not go line by a police services budget. We in the council does not have authority for that. The police services will present their budget from an operating perspective and a capital perspective, and council can approve that budget in whole. You do not have the authority to go line by line and say, take this out or take that out. You do have the authority to decrease the ask by a percentage if you so choose. However, that may be faced with an arbitration with the commission or the oversight. So as much as we will sit down and talk about the police services budget, going line by line is not an option. That is something the board would do with the police services themselves, and then it's presented to council as a whole.
Okay. So, anybody like to make a suggestion here? Sorry? Yeah. Mm-hmm. Well, I think probably the right thing to do would be to push it off till the 2nd of December. Your concern about budget was just answered by Mr. Brennan. So, again, whether it's OPP or OPS, it's a bulk number, right? It potentially can affect, I mean, if it goes OPP, we know that there's other issues associated with it, but it would seem to me that we do need some additional clarity here, and having perhaps the consultant come on the 25th and provide additional clarity might be the way to go. So, any other comments, Councillor? Is that what you think? Okay, so do you want to, Madam Councillor Sherwood, do you want to make a motion to move this vote to the 2nd of December? I think it's the 2nd, isn't it? Yeah, Monday the 2nd. Sorry. You're on.
Yes, Your Worship. I believe that we will not wrap up the budget discussions on the 25th and 26th. I'm quite confident that, you know, it'll still go into December. But having been put this this information here tonight, I think we're rushing ourselves too much to commit to 7 days from now making that. So I would like to put a motion that we delay that for at least another week to the 2nd of December.
Okay. Do we have a seconder for that motion? Councillor Andrews. All right. Sorry, Councillor Taylor.
I don't have the agenda in front of me, Your Worship, but I'm just curious, what else is on the 2nd? And I think through what that night is going to be for us, do we want to have a vote and then a big budget? I'm fine with the December 2nd, Councillor Sherwood. I'm not thinking about that. I'm just thinking, do we want to have a big vote like that that's going to be emotional and a big deal, I would think, for the majority of council and for the town, and then go on with budget after that? Or would we just...
Well, that was what was going to happen Monday night, so, I mean, we'd already accepted that as the inevitable, so, yeah, Councillor Sherwood.
I'm looking at the council calendar here. I believe the 2nd was council, and the next budget wasn't until the 9th. Perhaps Mr. Brennan or the clerk could clarify that, but I don't believe we were going to discuss budget on December 2nd. So that may be a great opportunity and a great time to do that. Perhaps have the consultant come back and also address not just the costing, but also he used the terminology of calls of service. I think we need to be clarified, because a lot of people in the public have thought that his calls of service might have been misrepresented. So maybe he could clarify that as well.
Yeah, I'm all for that. So, Mr. Brennan.
Your Worship, I spoke with the consultant today a couple of times. He's gone through his numbers again and calls to service, and he is, actually I've got a written report coming from him. He is quite confident, overly confident of their correct numbers. It's just that a lot of the calls for service do not fit into the UCR. The code is not a billable code. So many of the calls for service that we have in Orangeville, they are not billable under the OPP billing model. They are calls for service, and the OPS are rightfully correct to track them as calls for service. It's just that they are not chargeable by the OPP. So, actually, the consultant he is willing to come back, and maybe now with a delayed vote, he can come back and explain this to council in person, and I can reach out to him for that tomorrow if that's possible.
Okay, so I would recommend, if you could, have him come on the 25th or 26th. You know, I don't know what his schedule's like, to give us a little update and some clarity on some of these issues that have been brought up. Okay, so we have a motion here from Councillor Sherwood and seconded by Councillor Andrews to push the vote to December the 2nd. All in favor? Okay, there you go. Looking forward to the report and looking forward to further clarity. Thank you. All right, I think, any other new business, Madam Clerk? Sorry.
Sorry, it's not new business, Mr. Mayor, but I just wanted to point out that we do have our new Deputy Clerk, Carolina Khan, in the audience this evening.
Oh, very good,
Right,
okay.
so-
Carolina, yes, how are you?
And welcome her to the town of Orangeville.
Yes, welcome aboard, and thank you very much for joining our team. We appreciate it. That's great. So we have some, moving forward, we've got some bylaws here. Recommendation that the bylaws listed below be read 3 times and passed. A is a bylaw to authorize entering into a collective agreement with the Orangeville Professional Firefighters Association, Local 4328, and a bylaw to confirm the proceedings of the Council of the Corporation of the Town of Orangeville as regular and closed council meetings held on November 18th, 2019. May I have a motion? Councillor Peters, seconded by Councillor Andrews. All in favor? And we have a motion to adjourn, please. Deputy Mayor McIntosh, Councillor Sherwood, all in favor? Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.